In a historic move, Pope Francis is supporting civil unions for same-sex couples. The Jesuit cleric made the comments in an upcoming documentary. It is a break with the traditional position of the Roman Catholic Church. The pontiff has taken a more tolerant stance toward the LGBTQ+ community since his papacy began in 2013. The Pope called on nations to create laws to protect those couples, saying gay people have a right to be in a family. Official church teaching still calls homosexual acts, quote, intrinsically disordered. So for more on the Pope's latest comments, we would like to welcome Patrick Hornbeck. He is a professor of theology at Fordham University. Patrick, welcome. Great to have you with us. So put into context, how significant, thank you for being with us, how significant are these comments from the Pope for the church?
Well, I think it's a remarkable thing that the Pope has done today. No previous Pope has spoken this warmly about same-sex relationships, same-sex families. This is part of a trend that has been, as you said in your story, part of Pope Francis's papacy since 2013. I think it's also important, as you said in your story, to notice what hasn't changed today. So Pope Francis today has not changed the official teaching of the Catholic Church. He sent a message of hope and affirmation, and that's particularly important in those countries where homosexuality is still criminal or even punishable by death. But I think people on both sides will look at the Pope. Some will say he went too far. Others might say he hasn't gone far enough.
So, yes, Patrick, how do his comments, though, fit into church teachings? If it is still seen, if homosexual acts are still seen as intrinsically disordered by the larger Catholic sort of theology, how then does what the Pope says about, homosexuals being children of God and also deserve to be part of a family, how do those two sort of seemingly incompatible ideas exist?
Tanya, I think you're exactly right to ask that question. And the reason I think you're right to ask that question is that since he's been Pope, Pope Francis has, in a pastoral mode, affirmed LGBTQ lives and loves and families, but hasn't done so yet in a doctrinal mode. So he famously said, "Who am I to judge?" talking about gay priests. He was the Advocate's Person of the Year in 2013, and he's offered more affirmation to LGBTQ people, Catholic or non-Catholic, than any pope ever has. But you're entirely right that at the same time, Catholic teaching still condemns same-sex relationships. The underlying ethical teaching about same-sex sexuality is still there. And I think that's why the Pope hasn't been able to go perhaps as far as he himself wants to go. This seems to be a man who loves his gay friends, who knows and embraces trans people and queer people. But he's also the head of a church that for many, many years, and at great political cost to itself, has affirmed that every sexual act has to be open to procreation. And by definition, that rules out most LGBT people.
So how likely is this contradiction to be addressed in, church doctrine anytime soon, in our lifetimes, for instance?
That's a great question. The teachings that underlie the Catholic Church's opposition to homosexuality are deep, deep teachings. They have to do with what Catholics, or at least the Catholic Church officially believes, the purpose of human sexuality is, what the purpose of the family is. And so I don't think we're likely to see change anytime soon. What the Pope has done today in these comments is he's given a permission slip to Catholics and to Catholic leaders who want to take that extra step, who want to be pastoral as he's been in affirming LGBT people and their families and their loves. And that's no small thing. We have to remember that there are places all around the world where to be gay is to be thrown out of your family. Where it's to be beaten, where to be trans is to take your life in your hands. And so the Pope's statements, I think, will have an important effect and need to be celebrated that way. I think we also just have to be really cautious and say what he has and what he hasn't done here.
Do you think that by calling, homosexuals, children of God, it puts to bed puts to rest this idea that homosexuality is a choice?
Well, I hope it does. And unlike some other Christian traditions, the Catholic Church hasn't taught that for a very, very long time. Right. The Catholic Church's position, I think, still has some challenges with it. But the position is that homosexual desires are, as you put it, intrinsically disordered, which in church speak means oriented towards some potentially bad or evil end. So the analogy I use with my students at Fordham is, the kleptomaniac, the person who can't stop herself from stealing. That inclination towards stealing is intrinsically disordered. And that's where the Catholic Church gets its notion around homosexuality from. The difficulty is that's a far cry from what we've seen in other religious communities and in secular spaces, where the starting point is everyone is a child of God. And that means that their desires, their hopes, their heart is also formed by God. And that's the doctrinal hurdle that I think this Pope is going to continue to struggle to overcome.
Right. All right. Well, Patrick Hornbeck, thank you so much for joining us with all your insight. We really appreciate it.
Thank you.